Sweat prickled under Rhys Everett's silk tie, a cold bead tracing the collarbone where the monastery library's oppressive heat pressed down like a physical weight. The air shimmered, distorting the vaulted arches into watery, submerged turquoise ghosts. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of light piercing the high, grimy window, each one a tiny, silent scream. He traced the intricate wood carvings on the monogrammed box Boxy Severna, a labyrinth of swirling patterns that seemed to shift under his fingertip, whispering just beyond the edge of hearing. Oblivion's price tag, he thought. The phantom clink of his overdue debts louder than the silence. His fingers, usually so precise, felt thick, clumsy. The box felt unnaturally warm, almost alive, the wood grain whispering secrets against his skin like dry leaves skittering on stone. He lifted it, the polished timber surface cool beneath his palm, then suddenly slick, not damp, but twetty wet, as if the wood itself had wept. The sound was a sickening, moist shishlik, like a tongue dragging across a wet surface, then a soggy fifady. As the box slipped from his grasp, it cracked against the ancient stone floor with a sharp, splintering fiffa crack, the impact echoing with a hollow finality. Rhys stared, breath catching in his throat. The splintered wood lay open, revealing not the expected contents, but a profound, sucking darkness within the lead lining. The library's silence deepened, becoming a physical pressure, the kind that makes your ears pop. The whispers in the grain ceased, replaced by a deeper, more ancient quiet that felt like the library holding its breath. He knelt, the rough wool of his trousers scraping against the cold stone, ignoring the dust that coated his knees. The lead-lined box gaped open, the miniature star within not a light, but a dying ember of cold, blue-black void, sucking the air from the room. His mind raced, the debt collectors, the auction house, the way his last gamble had bled him dry. The whispers weren't in the wood anymore, they were in the fuddy absency of sound, a hollow where the library's usual creaks and groans should be. He fumbled in his pocket, the metallic rattle of loose change a feeble counterpoint to the crushing silence. Just a box civvy, he told himself, the lie tasting like ash. Just a box from a dead man's estate. Then, a single, impossibly slow motion, a sliver of wood no larger than a fingernail, detached from the shattered lid. It didn't fall. It drifted, suspended in the shimmering air, moving with a deliberate, unhurried grace that defied gravity. It glided, a tiny dark leaf caught in a still pond, passing through the shaft of light like a fragment of drowned sky. Rhys watched it, his breath frozen. The heat seemed to thicken, the submerged turquoise light deepening, the silence pressing in with the weight of the earth above. The splinter drifted past his nose, impossibly slow, its path a silent, deliberate arc. It passed the spot where his foot had been moments before, hovering for a heartbeat in the exact place he'd stood, the air around it shimmering with heat distortion. Then, with the quietest possible ticket, it settled onto the bare floorboard, landing with a sound like a single, dry leaf hitting stone. The lead lining felt cold against my fingertips, a stark contrast to the clammy warmth radiating from the shattered outer box. I braced myself, a gambler facing a final, desperate hand. The inner box was smaller, exquisitely crafted, the wood a darker, almost black hue. It felt expectant, as if it held its breath. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the library, a vibration that settled deep within my bones. I pried at the lid, the wood resisting with a dry, complaining whinny creak. It wasn't locked, but the craftsmanship was unnerving, the joints impossibly tight. A pressure built behind my eyes, a dull ache that resonated with the library's oppressive silence. Finally, with a sharp snap, the lid yielded. Inside, nestled in a bed of faded velvet, pulsed a miniature star. Not a light, not exactly. It was a dying ember of something else, a cold blue-black void that seemed to suck the warmth from the air. It whispered, not with sound, not in any language I recognized, but a chorus of voices just beyond the threshold of hearing, a suzerain that vibrated within my skull. They were ancient, layered, 1,000 voices speaking at once, coalescing into a single, unintelligible plea. The whispers intensified as I stared, pressing against my eardrums, a physical ache behind my eyes. I traced the sharp, cold edge of the lead lining, the metal biting into my skin. The whispers grew stronger, morphing into something almost recognizable, fragments of words struggling to surface from a submerged ocean of noise. They felt accusatory. I couldn't decipher them. But the intent was clear. A sharp, stinging sensation bloomed on my finger. I recoiled, instinctively pulling my hand back. A crimson bead welled up, a stark contrast to the blue-black void of the star. The whisper sharpened, becoming a high-pitched 40 Omen, a resonant frequency that seemed to vibrate the very air. The library's heat, already stifling, thickened into a physical weight, pressing down on me, making it difficult to breathe. The turquoise light shimmered, distorting the vaulted arches, transforming them into grotesque, undulating shapes. My vision swam, the edges blurring. Just a scratch, I told myself, the lie feeling brittle and false. Nothing to be concerned about. But the blood, a single, glistening drop, hung suspended in the air, defying gravity for a fraction of a second before plummeting towards the star. The full moon intensified, reaching a fever pitch. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the oppressive silence. The scent of dust and decay intensified, mingling with a metallic tang that clung to the back of my throat. The star flared, not with light, but with a sudden, violent expulsion of energy. The whispers ceased, replaced by a low, guttural frithrum that resonated deep within the stone floor. I stumbled back, shielding my eyes, a wave of nausea washing over me. The turquoise light pulsed, casting long, distorted shadows across the library. When I dared to look again, my shadow was wrong. It stretched across the wall, elongated and grotesque, its form subtly altered. It wasn't a shadow of a man, it was a shadow of something else. Something with elongated limbs, sharp claws, and eyes that glowed with an unnatural luminescence. The whispers returned, not in my ears this time, but emanating from the shadow itself, a chorus of mocking laughter echoing in the cavernous space. The metallic rattle of loose change in my pocket seemed impossibly loud. A desperate, futile signal in the face of the encroaching dread. The shadow writhed, a mockery of human form. The guttural fuffen vibrated through the stone, a physical tremor that threatened to shatter the stained glass windows high above. My breath hitched, a shallow rasp in the suffocating heat. It's playing with me, I thought. The lie, a desperate shield against the rising panic. It's feeding on my fear. The metallic rattle of the coins in my pocket was a frantic counterpoint to the low, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from the very walls. I backed away blindly, my hands outstretched, feeling for purchase on the velvet-lined shelves. The turquoise light pulsed, painting the room in shifting, nauseating hues. The shadow stretched further, its distorted limbs reaching, grasping. It felt close, too close. I stumbled. The scent of dust and decay thick in my nostrils, a cloying sweetness that made my stomach churn. Then I saw them. Not Tavadam. Exactly. Their manifestation, two feline heads pressed impossibly close, sharing a single emaciated body. The fur was matted, a patchwork of dull grays and sickly yellows, clinging to a frame that seemed to be collapsing in on itself. Festering sores, weeping pus, marred the skin. They were in the shadowed alcove, partially obscured by a towering stack of ancient tomes. The air around them shimmered, distorting the light, as if they were barely tethered to this reality. The fear rattle of the coins in my pocket escalated, a nervous tick I couldn't control. I froze, every muscle rigid, my heart hammering against my ribs. One of the feline heads lifted, its eyes yellow, reptilian, locking onto mine. They weren't the eyes of an animal, they were calculating, malevolent. The other head, without turning, flicked a pink, swollen tongue over a particularly gruesome sore, a slow, deliberate movement that sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. The whispers returned, but they weren't coming from the shadow now. They were emanating from the cats, a low, guttural murmur that resonated with the thuvunthrum in the floor. I couldn't decipher the words, but the intent was unmistakable. Amusement. Cruelty. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot. A primal terror had seized me, paralyzing my limbs. I watched helpless as they began to consume something. Not food, not anything I could identify. They were tearing at their own skin, delicately extracting. Something tiny, writhing things, pale and translucent, like miniature maggots. They were feeding on parasites, pulling them from their festering sores with a disturbing, methodical precision. The moist, teethy impression of their jaws on the polished timber surface of a nearby table was sickening. The rattle of the coins intensified, a frantic plea for escape. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the vision to disappear. It's a dream, I told myself, the words hollow and unconvincing. Just a nightmare. But the scent of decay was too real, the oppressive heat too palpable. When I opened my eyes, they were gone, vanished. The shadow remained, still stretched and distorted against the wall, but the feline entities were nowhere to be seen. The thrum in the floor subsided, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. The whispers faded, leaving only the frantic pounding of my own heart. Then I saw it. Suspended in the air where the cats had stood, hovering just above the polished floor, was a single, glistening parasite. It pulsed with a faint internal light, a miniature echo of the dying star within the box. It dripped, A single, viscous drop of translucent fluid fell onto the polished timber, leaving a shimmering trail. The rattle of the coins in my pocket seemed impossibly loud, a desperate, futile signal in the face of the encroaching dread. The turquoise glow had thickened, congealing into something solid, a viscous haze that pressed against my throat like a wet hand. My fingers trembled as they traced the edge of the nearest shelf, carved oak, the grain slick with the sheen of old oil. The library wasn't just a room anymore, it was a living thing, its walls pulsing with the same faint internal light as the parasite. The air shimmered, warping the edges of the tomes into jagged teeth. This isn't right. The thought clawed at my mind, but the words dissolved before they could form, swallowed by the rising kokoko, the chorus now a physical weight pressing against my eardrums. They emerged from the shadows first, not as specters, but as figures Sid, tall and gaunt, their robes the color of dried blood. The fabric moved without sound, clinging to limbs that seemed too long, too twined, like the limbs of insects stretched to grotesque proportions. Their faces were smooth, featureless except for the hollows where eyes should have been, until the pupils split open, vertical slits of black, reflecting the dying star's light like polished obsidian. The whispers coiled tighter, a serpent's tongue flicking against my skull. They're not here to haunt me. The realization slithered through my veins, cold and electric thorn. They're here to hunt. The first one stepped forward, its footfall silent, leaving no impression on the floor. The air ahead of it, as if disturbed by an unseen current. My breath hitched, the metallic rattle of my coins a frantic metronome against the silence. The figure's hand extended, skeletal fingers uncurling like the legs of a spider. I didn't flinch. I couldn't. The heat pressed against my skin, a physical force, and then contact it. A brush of cold, a whisper of dampness against my cheek. Not a touch. A fun marking. The imprint spread like ink in water, a handprint of mist, clammy and thick, seeping into the fabric of my suit. I could severe feel it each ridge of the fingers, the way the moisture clung to my skin, not drying, not fading, but toward its siverdeng, creeping toward my jaw. The chorus surged, a wet gurgle in my ears, the syllables twisting into something worse, ka-ka-ka-ka sound that wasn't meant for human throats. The figure tilted its head, the hollows of its face deepening, and I knew with a sickening certainty that it was Swen-tasting me, not my fear. My tetid. The coins in my pocket burned like embers. I tried to step back, but my legs wouldn't obey. The library had shifted. No, the Fuveld had shifted. The shelves now angled upward, the books floating in a slow, sickening orbit. The figures moved with them, their robes billowing as if caught in an unseen wind. The handprint on my cheek pulsed, a slow, rhythmic throb. I could hear it, the wet tooth, an impression of something pressing against my skin, not a touch, but a foof and claim. The whispers sharpened, a blade dragged across bone. Ka-ka-ka-ka-ka-ka, and then the first one smiled. Not with lips, with the fucking space where its mouth should have been, the hollows widening into a grin of needle-thin teeth. The mist on my cheek twitched dead, and I knew it wasn't a handprint anymore. It was a fodder-mouth. The library felt less like a room now, more like a collapsing lung stay. The whispers weren't pleading, they were directives. A humid warmth pressed against my skin, slicking my hair to my forehead. I ran, the polished wood of the floor blurring beneath my shoes, the scent of aged paper and something else, something acrid, like burnt sugar, clinging to the back of my throat. Each breath rasped, a frantic counterpoint to the rising Shoventekaken. I rounded a corner, the shelves a dizzying wall of spines. The turquoise glow pulsed, staining the shadows a sickly, unnatural hue. My own voice echoed, a phantom limb of memory. Welcome home. The words were alien, dredged from a place I'd sealed away years ago. A place I'd convinced myself no longer existed. The metallic fish-glinkly of my coins was a frantic plea in the oppressive silence. Home. God, what a grotesque jest. Panic clawed at my throat, a physical obstruction. I slammed a door, ornate carvings of grotesque beasts pressing into my palm. A desperate, futile act. The lock clicked, a mocking echo. Feel locked from the inside. The realization slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. My fingers fumbled for the handle, slick with a cold, unfamiliar moisture. The air thickened, vibrating with the chorus. Cockhook. The whispers coalesced, sharpening into a single predatory sigh that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. A wave of nausea rolled over me, and I leaned against the door, the carved beasts seeming to writhe in the turquoise light. I tried to recall the sequence of events to find a logical explanation, but the effort was futile. The library wasn't responding to logic, it was responding to something else. Something that knew me. Something that remembered. My mind fractured, a kaleidoscope of fragmented memories. A rain-slicked street, a panicked phone call. The weight of a shovel in my hands, the coins in my pocket rattled, a frantic reminder of the price I'd paid, the debt I'd buried. It's not real. It's a dream, a nightmare. But the clammy heat on my skin, the taste of copper in my mouth, those were undeniably real. I pushed off the door, my legs heavy, leaden. The turquoise glow intensified, bathing the library in an unearthly light. The shelves seemed to lean inward, the books tilting at impossible angles. The thukaikakate intensified, a physical pressure against my skull, threatening to shatter it. I stumbled forward, desperate to escape, to find an exit, any exit. The metallic rattle of my coins seemed to mock me, each twend clinkty. A hammer blow against my sanity. I focused on the sound, clinging to it as an anchor in the swirling chaos. It was a sound I understood, a sound of consequence, a sound of wealth, a sound of guilt. Then the door handle turned. Slowly, deliberately, the wood groaned under the pressure, a long, mournful sigh. The 20 carquet reached a fever pitch, a cacophony of voices pressing against my eardrums. The turquoise light pulsed, a malevolent heartbeat. And as the door swung inward, revealing the shadowed corridor beyond, I knew it wasn't a dream. It wasn't a nightmare. It was a reckoning. The world lurched. Not a dizzying spin, but a sickening realignment, as if the very bones of reality had been subtly reshaped. One moment, I was bracing against the door, the next, the polished wood pressed against my cheek, the scent of aged paper assaulting my nostrils. A low groan, a protracted sigh, seemed to emanate not from the door itself, but from the library's very foundation. The thoikakake intensified, morphing into a discordant hum that vibrated through my teeth. I scrabbled, my fingers finding purchase on the slick, varnished surface. The floor, no, the wall, was now a dizzying expanse, stretching downwards into a swirling vortex of turquoise shadows. Books cascaded past, a relentless rain of leather and paper, each went 1050, against the new floor echoing with unsettling resonance. The metallic rattle of my coins, usually a comforting presence, now felt like a mocking drumbeat against the chaos. A desperate, involuntary gasp escaped my lips, tasting of dust and rising panic. My hand, the one anchoring me to this inverted world, burned with the strain. The polished wood offered scant purchase, the varnish was treacherous, slick with a film of something indefinable. I risked a glance downwards. Where the floor had been, a yawning void stretched into the gloom, the turquoise light swallowed by the depths. It wasn't merely dark. It felt hungry, a pressure built in my chest, a suffocating weight that threatened to pull me down. Stay calm, analyze, adapt. The gambler's mantra ingrained through years of high-stakes games surfaced amidst the terror. There was no logic to this, no rational explanation, but panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. I tightened my grip, my knuckles bone, white, and scanned the wall for another hold. The shelves, once orderly rows of knowledge, now presented a vertical labyrinth. The spines of the books blurring into a chaotic tapestry. A book, bound in faded crimson, slammed against the new floor with a dull thud, sending a shower of dust motes dancing in the turquoise light. The sound resonated, a physical tremor that shook my hand. I focused on the sensation, the gritty texture of the varnish against my palm, the ache in my forearm. Anything to ground myself in the immediate reality, to resist the swirling vortex of disorientation. My muscles screamed in protest. The weight of my body, now pulling against gravity, was immense. I risked another glance downwards, the void seeming to deepen, to beckon. The whispers returned, softer now, but laced with an insidious mockery. "Welcome home, Rhys." Oh well, the words tasted like ashes in my mouth. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting back the rising tide of nausea. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. My fingers began to slip. The varnish, once slick, now felt almost greasy, as if coated in a thin film of oil. A silent prayer, a desperate plea to a god I didn't believe in, formed on my lips. I clawed, my nails scraping against the wood, a desperate, futile attempt to regain purchase. The crunch of falling books intensified, a relentless cascade of paper and leather. Then, a single book, pristine and untouched by the chaos, slid past me, its cover bearing my name. Rhys Everett. It floated, suspended in the turquoise light, a silent accusation. It wasn't a comforting recognition, it was a branding, a marker, a judgment. My hand gave way. The varnish beneath my palms was slick with something like oil, the grain of the wood now a jagged maze of resistance. My fingers ached, the knuckles raw from the scrabble against the inverted world. The cat, the thing, had vanished the moment my grip failed, swallowed by the swirling turquoise gloom, but it wasn't gone. I knew that. The whispers had gone quiet, but the air still hummed with their absence, like the lull before a storm. I forced myself to breathe in, out. The rhythm was all I had left. The metallic rattle of my coins against the wall, my pocket, was a cruel reminder of the world that had been. A world where gravity obeyed rules, where floors stayed floors and walls. Now, the coins jingled with every twitch of my fingers, a mocking symphony of the past. The former ceiling stretched ahead, a vast expanse of wood and dust motes suspended in the turquoise light. I pushed off, the soles of my shoes pressing into the grain, and the world tilted again, not with nausea but with the sickening certainty of wrongness. My legs burned as I pulled myself forward, the muscles protesting the unnatural angle. The drip-drip of water echoed from above, now below, each drop a slow, deliberate fall, as if time itself had thickened. The cat reappeared. It crouched on the new floor, its two heads swiveling in unison, black eyes reflecting the submerged light. The stench hit me first, a wet, coppery reek, like rotting meat left too long in the sun. My stomach lurched. The cat's body was a grotesque fusion, two sets of jaws dripping with something dark, something alive. The whispers slithered back, this time carrying a voice, a chorus of them, chanting in a language that wasn't language at all, just sound shaped into hunger. I didn't think. I moved. The former ceiling was a graveyard of books, their spines now vertical, their pages brittle with age. The cat's tail flicked, a slow, deliberate motion, and it turned, leading me deeper into the labyrinth. The turquoise light deepened, the water dripping faster now, the sound a relentless drip, drip, drip that drowned out everything else. My hand slipped on the wood, the varnish slick with something worse than oil, something funtin, like congealed blood. The lead-lined box glowed faintly ahead, a pulse of sickly light against the darkness. The cat stopped, its head tilting as if listening to something only it could hear. The whispers coiled around me, not mocking now, but tweefy expectant. I reached for the shelf, my fingers brushing against the spines of the books. They were cold, the leather dry and cracking beneath my touch. The cat's tail twitched. I lunged, my fingers closed around the box. It was heavier than I expected, the lead lining warm to the touch, almost twin-breathing. The cat didn't move, it watched. The turquoise light flickered, and for a moment the world stilled. The drip-drip stopped. The whispers held their breath. Then the cat's tail flicked again, and the world fell away. I tumbled backward, my body twisting in the air, the coins in my pocket scattering like shrapnel. The books rushed past, their spines a blur of red and gold and black. The last thing I saw was the cat's eyes, two black holes staring into mine, before the darkness swallowed me whole. The drip-drip returned, now a distant echo, as if the water itself had been drained from the world. I hit the ground, or what used to be the ground, with a thud that rattled my bones. The air rushed from my lungs in a gasp. The corridor of books loomed above, their shadows stretching long and wrong. The turquoise light dimmed, leaving me in near darkness. And then the whispers started again. The wood beneath my boots groaned with every step. The sound a slow, wet, fervent creak, like a drowning man's last breath. My fingers twitched toward the pocket where the coins still rattled. Clink, clink-a-link, a reminder of the world that had fallen away, the one where debts were paid in cash and guilt was just another flavor of shame. The turquoise light here was thick, almost viscous, pressing against my skin like the afterimage of a nightmare. The air smelled of old parchment and something fouler, the copper tang of blood that wasn't mine. The books stretched endlessly ahead, their spines now vertical, their edges jagged as broken teeth. I didn't dare look down. The floor was gone, or rather it had become the ceiling, and the ceiling had become the floor, and the walls in God, the walls had become the walls of a prison I couldn't escape. My breath came in shallow gasps, each one a hiss between my lips like a snake's warning before the strike. A shadow moved, not a flicker, not a trick of the light. A thing. It detached itself from the shelf with a sound like tearing silk, a wet foot in shred. That made my stomach clench. The figure was angular, all sharp edges and hollow eyes, its form flickering like a candle flame in a draught. It slashed at me, shink, and I felt the cut before I saw it, a hot line of fire across my forearm. No blood, not yet. The air smelled of ozone, of metal, of something twinkling and wrong. I pressed my fingers to the wound, but there was nothing there, no tear in the fabric of my skin. You left her there. The voice wasn't a voice. It was the sound of 1,000 whispers pressed into one, a chorus of the forgotten, their words dripping with accusation. My knees nearly buckled. The memory surged up, her face pale and still, the way the sheet had clung to her like a second skin. I had paid the men to make it look like an accident. I had told myself it was mercy, but now in this inverted hell, the truth coiled around my ribs like a serpent. Another shadow, then another. They peeled away from the shelves, their movements jerky, unnatural, like marionettes controlled by hands too far away. They circled me, their hollow eyes drinking in my fear. I backed away, my heels slipping on the slick wood, the coins in my pocket jingling like a death knell. The whispers slithered closer, not mocking now, but hungry. You left her there. You left her there. You left her. You left her. A shadow stepped forward. It had my face. Not a reflection, not a trick. It was me, or what I had been before the guilt had taken root. Its eyes were black pits, its mouth stretched too wide, too thin. The lips peeled back in a grin that wasn't a grin but a 40 warning. It raised a hand cold as a corpse's touch, and pressed it to my chest. The pressure was like ice, seeping through my shirt into my skin straight to my heart. You left her there, it whispered, and the words were a blade twisting in my ribs. I gasped, my lungs burning. The shadow's fingers dug in, not pushing, not pulling, but tulling but tutty-holding. The whispers rose around me, a storm of sound, of accusation, of fifth-knowing. The turquoise light pulsed thick and slow, like a dying heartbeat. And then, a fish ink, the shadow's hand sliced through my chest. Not a cut, not a wound. A presence, sir, cold and sharp, filling me with something that wasn't air, wasn't blood, but the weight of every sin I had ever committed. I staggered, my vision swimming, the coins in my pocket now silent, as if even they had been drained of life. The shadow's face, my face twisted in triumph, and then it was gone, leaving only the whispers, and the hand still pressed to my chest. Cold as death, the whispers had been my own voice all along, not the hollow, accusing Fredin Coruscant. This was Sadai, my breath ragged, my words dripping with the venom of truth. The debt was never money, it was the girl. The syllables curled around my ribs, cold and deliberate, the weight of them pressing me into the turquoise depths. The light here wasn't light at all. It was the slow, suffocating pulse of something drowning, the way the water would press against a body submerged too long, the way the edges of vision blurred into the color of a bruise. I staggered back, my heels catching on the slick wood, the floor that wasn't a floor, and the coins in my pocket jingled, a desperate, metallic protest. My fingers fumbled for the box, the lead-lined thing, the one I had stolen from her grave, the one I had buried in my safe, then in my mind, then in the lies I told myself. The box was warm now, or perhaps it was just me, the heat of my skin seeping through the layers of wood and metal, the way guilt always did, slow, insidious, the naive. You left her there. The voice wasn't an echo. It was the truth, unspooling from the darkness, like a length of silk, smooth and suffocating. My hands shook. The memory surfaced, not the polished version, the one I had carved out of half-truths and whiskey, but the raw, jagged thing, the way her fingers had gone limp in mine, the way her breath had stuttered into silence. I had paid the men to make it look like an accident. I had told myself it was mercy. But the truth was simpler, uglier. I wanted her gone. The whispers coiled tighter, not around my ears, but around my soul. See, the way a cat might wrap itself around a man's ankles, not to play, but to hold dead. And then, there it was, the weight of it, the four-dead-eye cat. Not one, not two, but the thing that had been both. Its body a grotesque fusion of fur and sinew, its eyes twin pits of hunger. It moved toward me, not with the grace of a predator, but with the deliberate, fid-lazy slink of something that knew it had already won. The cat's mouth opened, too wide, the jaws unhinging with a wet thiffer click, and the whispers poured out, not from its throat, but from the festering sores along its sides, the parasites writhing within them, feeding on something darker than blood. The air smelled of copper and rot, the sweet, cloying stench of decay. I retched, the bile burning the back of my throat, but there was nothing left to give. The cat's tongue flicked out, a black, forked thing, tasting the air, tasting trimbine. You left her there, it hissed, and the words were not words at all, but the sound of a knife being dragged across bone. I pressed my palms to the wall, the ceiling, the floor. It didn't matter anymore. The turquoise light swallowing my fingers whole. The box in my pocket pulsed, or perhaps it was my heart. The whispers twisted, now not just my voice, but Hersed, the girl's, the one I had buried, the one I had left to rot. You took it from me. Fu, she whispered. Fun, you took the star. The truth crashed over me. I hadn't inherited the box, I had stolen it from her grave, from the dirt that still clung to her skin. The lead-lined thing wasn't a gift, it was a 40 FT, and the debt wasn't money, wasn't favors, wasn't even my soul. It was her, the life I had taken, the trust I had shattered. The cat's body pressed against my legs, its fur damp and clinging, the parasites burrowing deeper into its flesh, their movements visible beneath the translucent skin. They weren't feeding on blood, they were feeding on blood memory. The whispers became a storm, a hurricane of sound, the words pressing in from every side. You left her there. You stole the star. Foo. You left her there. Fruity left her there. The chorus swelling, drowning me out. I wanted to scream, to beg, to run, but my body was a statue carved from shame and fear. The cat's claws dug into the wood beneath me, the sound like nails on a chalkboard, the wet, thickened crepe of something tearing free. The floor, the wall began to tilt, and then the world twin-shifted. Not a fall, not a sway, a full rotation, the gravity twisting like a knife in my gut, pulling me sideways, toward the wall, toward the ceiling, toward the nothingness of the turquoise light. The cat's body followed, its weight dragging me down. Up to the embrace of the whispers, the parasites writhing in its sores, the box in my pocket now burning like a brand. The last thing I saw was the cat's grin, too wide, too knowing, its eyes black holes staring into mine. You left her there, it whispered, and the words were the last thing I heard before the world turned sideways. The wall wasn't stone, it was liquid. My fingers sank into it with a wet twist loop, the resistance yielding like warm jelly. Turquoise water, thick as blood but colder, clung to my skin as I pressed deeper, seeking purchase against the drowning light. The blood pooling on the wall, my blood, dark and viscous, wasn't just forming words. It was Suji writing them, the crimson letters rising from the wall's surface like bubbles surfacing in a deep well. You are the ritual. The phrase pulsed with the slow, suffocating rhythm of the turquoise depths, each letter a fresh wound in my mind. I'd always thought the ritual was the box, the stolen star, the cat's whispers, but the wall was the altar. I was the sacrifice. The metallic rattle of coins in my pocket was gone. Silence, thick as the water, pressed in. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of it, the heavy, drowning silence of a grave sealed shut. I could hear my own breath, ragged and shallow, the hiss-hissy of air fighting the water pressure. The wall bled more, the blood flowing downward in slow rivulets, spelling the words with a deliberate, viscous grace. You are the ritual. My fingers dug deeper, the schluppet of my flesh meeting the wall's yielding surface echoing in the suffocating quiet. I tried to pull back, but the wall held me, the liquid stone gripping like a lover's desperate hand. The copper tang of my blood filled my nostrils, mixing with the sweet rot of the cat's parasites from before. I saw her face then. Lila's not in memory, but 20 here, in the blood, her eyes wide and accusing in the turquoise gloom. You left her there. The words weren't whispers anymore. They were the water itself, the very light pressing against my skin. The blood words swam before my eyes, the letters blurring then sharpening. You are the ritual. It wasn't a question. It was the truth, cold and final as a coffin lid. I'd spent years burying the truth in lies, in the lead-lined box in the safe. But the wall wouldn't let me hide. It was the truth. My fingers sank deeper, the loopy louder now, a wet, intimate sound in the absolute silence. The wall wasn't bleeding. It was remembering, and it was writing my sentence in my own lifeblood. The blood words began to solidify, the crimson letters hardening into something permanent, something cold and final. I watched as the last letter formed, the du dientu, in sinking into the wall like a stone. The silence deepened, becoming a physical weight, pressing the air from my lungs. The turquoise light dimmed, not fading, but sinking, retreating into the wall's depths like water draining from a basin. The last thing I saw was the word, stark and undeniable against the liquid stone, foody end. Then darkness. Not the absence of light, but a foo presence, thick and absolute. The silence was no longer empty, it was full of the sound of the coins long gone, replaced by the thick, wet silence of drowning. And then, nothing, just the word, just the dark, just the silence where the rattle used to be.